All right, welcome in, hockey fans, to another live edition. It was so much fun last week. We decided to come back live again tonight on the Pro Hockey West Report. Scott Strandy with you tonight, not in San Jose, not in San Diego, not in Phoenix, not in Denver, but in Inver Grove Heights, Minnesota. Stephen Marsh in my upper right from Las Vegas, Nevada, and Nick Maxon from just down the street a little ways in Apple Valley, Minnesota. So, Nick, it was a fun day today to roam around the NCHC. That's the college ranks. But, we're back to talking pro hockey. Now we're going to recap the face-off. So, first of all, how are you, gentlemen?
Doing good, Scott. Hockey, I think when we talked earlier today, and we'll obviously discuss this a little bit later, but for us, it feels like today was, training camp day one for us as media, right? When we're finally getting in to do media day, talking with the players, talking with the coaches, seeing other members of the media there. A lot of fun there at Xcel Energy Center. Again, getting back in the flow of things. And more importantly, Scott, really no COVID protocols or talk of it. So I think that was the best part about it. Was it feels more normal. Granted, COVID is still a thing. It's not completely gone, but it does feel like business as usual before the pandemic hit, and that's great to see.
Stephen, you had a chance to get out to the Golden Knights training camp opening day today. Back in the locker room, that had to be fun.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun being back in the locker room and talking to the different players and just having that experience and hearing what their excitement and how that was. So yeah, it was exciting for the players. It was exciting for, I think, for the fans that watched. Exciting, I think, for the media members that were there. I kind of equate like the first day of school. Everyone's kind of ready for the summer to be over and ready to get back in school and get ready to start learning again. And for these guys, of course, to start the pursuit for a championship.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we went live last Thursday night from the, what do they call that place? The Ice, Sharks Ice or something like that in San Jose. Wow. I'm just like all over the place.
Well, you've been yeah, it's close. You've been everywhere the last few days, Scott, so it's understandable.
So anyway, we had a chance to watch 9 games over 4 days. Hockey at its finest at the AHL/NHL level. We talked about last week how important it was for these guys to get a feel for what the NHL is like, whether it means the travel part of it, the per diem part of it, the practice part of it, the morning skate part of it, the wearing of the official uniforms. And I think my opinion was walking away from that, it was exhausting. So I can only imagine how the players must have felt. That's a lot of hockey in a very short period of time. But a lot of them took away what Stephen and I took away, which was it was kind of starting of the season and kind of breaking in. And a lot of the players will tell you that it was great because they were able to get a 3 or 4 day head start on the main training camps. So they were, in Vegas's case, for example, they were learn the system of Bruce Cassidy, that type of thing. So I think for the 6 teams that were there and the players were there, everybody had different agendas, but yet they were all out there still trying to win hockey games. We'll break down how everything finished. It wasn't a true tournament. It was 3 games, right? So everybody played 3 games and they had a score as well. Let me break down the record so you know. Colorado and the Kings and Anaheim and San Jose all finished with 2-1-0 marks. The Vegas Golden Knights 1-1-1. The Anaheim Ducks 1-1-1, and the Arizona Coyotes 1-2-0. We saw the first night that the games were very tight. The goaltenders were pretty sharp. I think it was the number ones probably from everybody that played that first day. And then things loosened up a little bit. The scoring came around on day 2, and day 3 it was just a battle of who wasn't the tiredest, if that makes sense. All right, so Stephen, I'll throw it to you just for your quick thoughts on what you saw. And Nick wasn't there, but he can give us his thoughts of what he saw from a distance.
Well, yeah, I think you kind of said a lot of it. I think you're the first days you mentioned.
I'm good at that.
Yes, yes, you are. 3-2 scores the first night. All three games were that. So that was good. It was pretty. I asked last week when we were doing the show, would we see a fight? And yes, we saw a fight. It didn't take very long. In the second game, at least, there was a fight in the first period between the Golden Knights and the Coyotes. So that was not surprising. And then as the tournament went, or it's the tournament, but as this weekend went on, it got a little bit more physical. I thought certainly a little bit more intense, and people banging each other around and stuff. And somebody that I guess got banged around a little bit was Brendan Brisson, who was really good for Vegas, but he played in 2 games. He didn't play in the third game, and then he shows up to training camp with a red non-contact jersey on today. So obviously, something happened during the rookie face-off. But it sounds like it's not going to last too long, because Kelly McCrimmon said that they hope that tomorrow, or at least sometime this camp, that'll be taken off. But that was interesting to see Brendan Brisson in a contact jersey, an all contact jersey, because he was just playing in that. And so obviously he must have got, but there was a couple of players really banging him around those couple of days. So I'm not totally surprised. And that's always my fear when you do these things. It's great, and they need it. They need the work and everything. But these games don't matter necessarily for wins and losses. But if somebody gets a serious injury, well, that can affect a lot of things, whether it's going to be a player that's going to be on the AHL team, or whether they're going to go back to college and play their NCAA program or junior program, or whatever the case may be. So that's what you hope for, that doesn't happen. And so hopefully for Brisson, it's just a minor thing, and we'll get through with that easily. But yeah, it was intense, and there was some good hockey too. You definitely saw teams that had a better matchup of players than others. So those were just some of the things I kind of observed throughout the weekend.
Nick, your thoughts from a distance?
So from a distance, Scott, when you look at, we talk about meaningless games, right? Now they're meaningless from a record standpoint, right?
Yeah.
They're certainly not meaningless to the players that are on the ice, right?
No.
These guys are fighting for jobs. These guys are fighting for their dreams of trying to reach the National Hockey League. And it depends on what stages of their career, right? We had 18 and 19-year-olds. We also had as old as 25-year-olds, right? Who are maybe this is their last chance to make an impression on their respective front offices, right? So this is where, and I think, Steven, you hit it on the head. This is where, there is a concern sometimes for when you have guys that are trying to make that impression. And sometimes it's the physical part of the game. You do worry about injuries to maybe some of your players, like a Brendan Brisson, or to maybe say a Mason McTavish, right? That clearly will be into the next round of normal NHL training camps. And you're just hoping that, nothing bad happens, because especially for the Anaheim Ducks, right? Say it's Mason McTavish. He's a big part of their young core that's coming up right now. Brendan Brisson definitely is, going to be part of the Vegas locker room. I think he's going to be, shall we say, a numbers acquisition, but also because he's a skilled player, right? They don't have many skilled players that they've drafted that are in their lineup. A lot of them they have traded away. So it was a good weekend, I think, overall. I think it was well received. It sounds like, from what I was reading, the overall impression of Tech CU Arena and Sharks Iceplex was very, very positive. So now you just hope that with what we saw, what the front offices saw, that now that training camps are announced, what's next for some of these players. For some, it's back to the American Hockey League, some to their juniors, and then also for some, and the lucky few, it's an invite to the big club, hoping to crack a 23-man roster in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, well put. I want to touch basically on a couple of things that are positive and one thing that's negative. I think the job that San Jose did putting this on was fantastic. It's difficult. You got 6 professional teams that all want a little bit of love in certain ways. It was very hard for them to all put up their backdrops. I know the Coyotes were like in a little corner. The Colorado Avalanche were out in the middle of a hallway. So, I mean, these things are hard to do, and I get it. And I thought they did a fantastic job. I would like one thing to be answered to me, though, and this comes all the way back to last year in Glendale. If you have 3 games, why do you need to put one of the games in a, for lack of a better term, a community rink? Why can't you space it out over the course of the day where you can play all 3 of them in the big building? You played 2 in San Jose. They played 2, the first one and the last one. Why could you not space that out and play them all there? And last year, the same thing at Gila River. Why can't you just play all 3 games? If that's what you're going to do, then just make accommodations to play all 3 games, because you could start one a little earlier and maybe start one a little bit later, and you can accommodate that very easily. As a media person, and I'm sounding like I'm whining now, but I'm not. But, you start in the big rink, the new rink in San Jose, the Tech CU. Then you have to pack your stuff up. Then you got to go to the other rink, except there's really not any seats for you. So you got to stand along the glass to watch that game. Then you got to race back again to Tech CU and A, hope that your spot is still there, and B, lug your equipment with you again and get set up for that big rink. So that's my complaint. I'm sure there must be a reason, because it doesn't seem like it would be something they would do if there wasn't a reason.
Well, I'll tell you what the reason is, Scott, and maybe we overlooked this, but I think the ice management crew has entered the chat. I think we forget that the ice takes a beating with this, and you kind of wonder if that's really just ice management. Because I mean, even in 3 games at the NCHC, frozen faceoff, right? And mind you, the XL Energy Center, home to the Minnesota Wild, last spring here. I mean, there was a game against Chicago the afternoon before the championship game. So that ice was not fantastic for the championship game. So you kind of wonder if it's more just ice management. I would say 3 games a night. Was it 2 in a row, a day off, and then 3 again on Monday? I bet that especially for a new arena, that probably would have beat the ice to the pulp. That's my thing, and I guess my guess. Steven, do you have a guess on that? Am I correct, or am I, as I say, wrong?
Well, as much as I'd love to say you're wrong, Nick, I think that's probably a big part of it. I think obviously, I just think because of the timing of the games too. I mean, you could make it a bigger gap in between games, but and let's keep in mind too that this was, sometimes when you see like a scrimmage situation, you see a game that's like 2 20-minute half thing, or you have or 25 running clock thing, but these were actual like legit games. They had everything was the period, 3 periods, 20 minutes, stoppages, all the normal stuff. They come out and scrape all the normal stuff you see in a game. So all that's in there. Of course, it's probably not as long because the breaks aren't long, the intermissions probably aren't as long, but certainly the games ended faster. But so I think if you're gonna have it on all one rink, then you're gonna have 3. You're gonna have to probably do a larger gap, and I think probably the ice does get more of a beating. Of course, it's a new ice surface, so it's probably could handle that. But I think the other thing too is locker room space. Obviously, with this facility, everybody had their own kind of space, and I think that certainly could have still been the case. But I think last year with the situation in Arizona, had they had everybody in one spot, I don't know how you would have been able to have everybody keep their equipment there at Gila River and then have to just kind of, they'd have to keep unpacking it and packing it every day. So, so I think that's they still had to do. They still had to do that, I guess, to go there.
That's what I'm going to interrupt you. Mm-hmm. There are plenty of locker rooms at Gila River where you could have put them, especially where we saw people go at the Iceplex and at the CU Tech CU. So that's not the issue. The issue is probably the ice. I get it. Yeah. It's just frustrating because you see 2 really good games on a nice ice surface, and then you got to go stand and look through scratch glass. And again, I get it. That's what those rinks are for. But I don't think it's fair to the teams that have to play over there. And some teams played 2 games over there, some just 1. So I don't know. I'm just frustrated over the fact that they couldn't all be in one building.
Well, yeah, it's frustrating for you, of course, and for us because we're trying to cover it and we're trying to be, give coverage to that, and you have to go from one to the other. It's like, thankfully, it wasn't that difficult to get to the other side. But the other thing I think is the scouts and stuff and all the player of the teams, they probably didn't like that either. I mean, because it's Tech CU Arena. The different teams had the different. They used the different suites. They were up along the row where we were sitting for ones that had different from different teams, and then you have to go over to the other rink and you have to sit on the bleachers like everybody else, or up in the bar or somewhere
down by the glass,
or down by the glass, and in fact it looked crowded in there when they in those games in the orange rink, but about maybe 85% of those crowds in the stands were all scouts and player personnel of the different teams and everything. So, and the camera and the stream quality too was not that good. Well, I mean, from what I understand, was better obviously at TechCU than it was at the Orange Rink. So if your team, if you were wanting to watch your team and they were playing at Orange Rink, the following it was a little bit more difficult than obviously when it was over at TechCU. So those are some other things too.
Okay, Nick, because you weren't there, we'll start with your teams and we'll help you out with. You have some questions on it. Let's start with the Anaheim Ducks. I can tell you right now that there was a couple players there that maybe could have not been there. Owen Zellweger, I thought probably could have been eliminated from that, but I get it. He needed the experience of that. And then Mason McTavish, I was shocked that he played all 3 games and put in the effort that he did. But you know what? Every team is different. We talked about teams flying charter. Steven saw the Ducks team at the airport with him flying back commercial. So not everybody took it to that level.
No, and again, that's what sort of the read between the lines is the whole reason this tournament exists, right? Is to kind of separate the men from the boys, to put it lightly, right? And even more so to highlight who came in prepared, who came in willing to, or maybe shall we say, who improved over the summer, who maybe took a coach's things to work on and actually did, whether that is, maybe putting on 10, 15 pounds, maybe it's going and trying to get a little bit faster in your stride. That's the entire idea, right? And it's disappointing too, right, Scott, when you have some guys that you're high on who maybe were trending upwards at the end of the last season. And you think, okay, well, the trajectory is good. And then all of a sudden it feels like they just kind of hit a wall, or they maybe don't impress, or that trajectory just doesn't seem to keep going up, right? And then as you mentioned too, with Mason McTavish, it's the opposite end of the spectrum. You can tell that they shouldn't be there, and it's a compliment to that player, right? I just want to make sure our audience understands, like when we say that, that's a compliment. That means that, this is, what your high school varsity guy playing against your peewees, right? It's just, the skill level for Mason McTavish to compare to what he was playing with was night and day. No question. He is part of the Anaheim Ducks regular training camp. Again, he already has his first NHL goal. I get the sense for Mason, it was just a chance to go through it. I don't think he'll go through it again. Based on what we know of him, based on what we saw, especially in the World Juniors. So to me, it was more an experience ride for him just to see what that was like as a prospect camp one, and then obviously the prospect tournament. But I definitely feel like for him, it was going to be a one-time thing. And he didn't disappoint. He was one of the players that, as you mentioned, impressed, especially those who were with the Anaheim fan base.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also he had the opportunity to wear the C and be a leader for albeit for 4 days, but he got some leadership quality. And I think the other thing that was extremely important was they gave him the opportunity to get a head start on training camp, to get his legs under him. I really think that he's going to be a part of the Ducks organization when the puck drops for real in October. So I think that combination is why Mason McTavish was there, but he clearly was the best player on the ice for the Ducks, and usually against the teams that he played, he was the best player on the ice. So got to go with that thought. Steven, anything to add about Anaheim that struck you?
Not necessarily. I think he was certainly someone that stood out. I think with the Ducks, we've talked about before, it was, there's a lot of young players that are going to be getting a chance to maybe get on a roster spot, and of course the big club has already got a lot of young talent, and now you look at the prospects, and there's going to be a lot of young players that are going to be getting an opportunity. So I think they had a decent showing, and it was they did okay. And of course McTavish was somebody that did stand out for the Ducks.
Okay, let me take the Colorado one, and then we'll tell you a little bit of what I got from head coach Greg Cronin of the Colorado Eagles, who was coaching this. That's the other thing, guys. I don't know how many people understand this, but the AHL staff were basically coaching these prospects, if you will, in the tournament. So while they were wearing the NHL colors and the NHL logos, it was the AHL staff, and in the case of Vegas, the director of player development, was running the show. But the Colorado guys, I thought, carried themselves pretty well. There's a couple of things I want to highlight here. Cameron Wright, the Denver product, just came off of a national championship in college in April, and got a lot of playing time in almost every situation. So I asked Greg Cronin about that. You'll hear his response here in just a few minutes. I also saw Wyatt Emmett was wearing the C, which I keep thinking, think about this for a minute. You're playing in college, you're playing in the national championship game in April, and in September, you're wearing a letter for the team, the professional team that you're playing for. To me, that tells you something about the training. So I had a chance to ask Nathan Smith that too, and we'll get to that in just a little bit as well. But that was interesting to me that of all the guys there, a majority of the guys that played NCAA hockey were wearing some sort of letter, whether it be a C or an A, for every team. Colorado did bring some of their better AHL players. I mean, Bocage was there. We talked about Ben Myers being there. We talked about a number of players that were solid. They brought Eustace Noonan, their goaltender, who had some time with the Avalanche in the Stanley Cup run when they had injuries to goaltenders. Darcy Kemper, when he was out with the eye injury for a little while, Eustace was the backup there. So there were some pretty talented players. I thought Colorado showed themselves well. Here's the one negative that I was really frustrated at. Steven's sick of me talking about this because I wore him out all night long in our room. I just kept bringing it up, and 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd say, Steven, you can't believe this. It frustrated me. Okay, here's what happened. For the most part, all except for one game, 8 of the 9 were really good hockey, I thought. For some reason, San Jose decided that they needed to settle a score, maybe, or I don't know. Nobody told me why, but it was physical. Okay, I get physical. There's confrontations. I get confrontations. They're one-on-one. Maybe you fight, maybe you don't, but you get it over with. But what I saw from the entire Colorado Avalanche game versus the San Jose Sharks was every time there was a confrontation, it was one-on-one, and the next thing you knew, there were 2 more Sharks in on it. And it was a 2-on-1, 3-on-1 situation all the time. And it was cross checks, and it was, hits from behind, and it was all the little dirty things that you don't want to see in hockey. And it was clearly, in my mind anyway, a score being settled or a message being sent. The roster, if you look at it for what the Sharks had on the ice that night they played Colorado, was bulky, to say the least. Everybody that they had that was over 200 pounds was in the lineup. So I just didn't feel there was a need for that. And I don't know. I'm not trying to bash the Sharks, but it clearly sounded like, they were sending a message to the Stanley Cup champions, or they had a score to settle from before.
Or do you wonder, Scott, if, and I think you're right in one of those two, but dare I say, I wonder if there was a message sent from the Shark staff to their own players to say, hey, and this was game 3, right? This was the Monday game you're talking about.
No, game 2.
This was game 2. You kind of wonder if maybe in game 1, they didn't like what they saw. They thought maybe they were passive on the opportunity to be physical. I doubt that's the case, but you kind of wonder, sometimes coaches have let a spark, and maybe it's not necessarily that it's Colorado. Maybe it's not necessarily the fact that it's the now defending Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche. You just kind of wonder if maybe the coaching staff sent a message to the players to say, hey, if you want to earn a spot with a big club, show me you can be physical too, because it's going to get a lot worse at the NHL level. And from what we saw last game, ain't going to work. You kind of wonder if maybe that's part of it too.
Well, it certainly could be. I'm not going to say that. The one part that I keep going back to is, if you want to be physical, great. And they were physical, but you don't need the 2-on-1, 3-on-1 stuff. If it's going to be a 1-on-1 matchup, especially at this level of experience, if you will. And again, call me a homer if you want. I saw Cam Wright get into a fight with a guy that was much bigger than him, and he really had no business doing it. But credit to Cam, he stood up for himself. But again, more guys jump in. I just don't like the fact that there's multiple players. It's got to be even in my book. And I don't know. Anyway, that was just one thing, and it was noticeable to me. I looked on my Twitter feed. It was noticeable to a lot of people that were following it on the streams. So that means that if I saw it and other people saw it, it was probably real.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Anyway, let's jump in and hear what Coach Greg Cronin had to say after the final game in San Jose.
All right, Coach Cronin with us here today. Coach, you finished up 3 games in 4 days. What's the general thought? What do you take away from this?
I thought today's game was our best game. It's funny because you get a lot of new faces and you're juggling people through the lineup, and it's not a lot of practice time. Yesterday morning, we had a really good practice, tried to integrate some of the things that we weren't doing well the first 2 games, and I thought they did a really good job executing that today.
I want to ask you about 2 players in particular. You had Wyatt Ahmet with the C on. We'll start with him. Tell us a little bit about his development. You saw him a little bit last year with the Eagles, but how has he developed for you?
He's done really well. Like he struggled when he first came into the league, and he worked really hard with Aaron Schneekloth, our defensive coach, just on some footwork things and just his skating basically in small ice areas. And then, because he's a physically strong guy, but he was just doing some things improperly that were taking his. He actually is very strong, taking the strength away from him with his movement. So he did a lot of work with that, and slowly but surely he started to get really confident with that. And then his game took off, as you saw in the playoffs. He became a really good penalty killer and a really good stay-at-home defenseman. I think he demonstrated that, this whole tournament.
Leadership-wise, has he matured that way too?
Yeah,
he's a little older individual.
Yeah, he's an older guy, so he's been around, and he's been a leader wherever he's been. He carries himself that way off the ice as well.
Okay, and final one is on Cam Wright. He was a free agent pickup for you guys. You guys signed him to an AHL contract, and I saw you had him out in a bunch of different positions. Was that kind of the idea, to have him play penalty kill and regular shift and power play and a little bit of everything?
Yeah, I mean, he's a good player, and he came out of Denver, so we're kind of familiar with him, and we just wanted to give him a couple roles and see what he could do with them. I thought he did a good job.
Thanks, Coach.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, so you had a chance to hear from Coach Greg Cronin talking about some of the younger players. Younger, they're all younger. There were some of the older players there, but just a feel for what they had. I thought that was interesting. It kind of reiterates what I was saying about the NCAA players and things like that. So, okay, Stephen, over to you. Let's start off with your Vegas Golden Knights and what you experienced with them.
Yeah, I think so. With Vegas, I think obviously the eyes were on players like Brendan Brisson and Caden Korzak. So those guys were certainly somebody that was going to be focused on, and they certainly were really good. Brendan wasn't like overbearing, but he was certainly, you could tell that he's getting better and better. But so I want to talk about a couple that really stood out to me that maybe weren't kind of, maybe it's a little bit of a unknowns, not necessarily unknowns, but just had really good performances. I thought Leighton Ahak was really good for Vegas. He on the defensive side with Caden Korzak. In fact, that's another guy that Vegas is very high on. If there's an opening in the defensive area, and it was actually said today at the training camp with Kelly McCrimmon and stuff, and even Bruce Cassidy said that. I think we already know the defense core pairs are already set in Vegas. This is unless of course the Nick Hague thing, but I think Leighton Ahak is somebody, like I said, they're high on, and he had a pretty good performance in the rookie tournament or the rookie face-off this past weekend. Caden, of course, was really good. I also thought Jordan Gustafson wasn't bad either. He was somebody that they just drafted this past draft class, and he kind of stood out to me the way he was playing in different plays and in the action as well. So he had he had an assist on the one game against the Kings, and I think he even got a goal during the weekend, if not a couple of goals. So yeah, so he was another player that stood out to me too from Vegas. I think the goaltending was good with Isaiah Seville and Vickman. Those were the two that played. I thought Isaiah was really good, especially in but then you look at the overtime game. So here was the one thing: the Vegas. There was a play at the end of the game against the LA Kings, and a Vegas player got took out a Kings player pretty.
Carter Souch, right?
Mhm.
Carter Souch, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
He got a match penalty and got kicked out of the rest of the game. So Vegas is now having to do a whole overtime period with a penalty killing, and they were able to do that very well. And I think that went to the goaltending too, which was Vickman that night, and so he stood on his head in the overtime period too. And then how about you like this? And then you talk about that same guy that got hit pretty hard comes in the shootout, and Brant Clark.
And that'd be
scores.
Brant Clark, yep.
Brant Clark comes in and scores in the shootout, and then he walks off. He doesn't even go and celebrate with the team. It's just like the old mic drop, hockey edition. He scores and he just goes right off the ice, opens the door himself with his stick, and goes off the ice. Then they're like, call him to come back, and then he's like confused, and he comes back, and then he goes and celebrates with this team. So he'll learn that you just can't walk off the ice. You got to go and celebrate with your players and stuff like that. So that was a funny moment. But for Vegas, yeah, so those were some of the players I thought were pretty good. Korczak, Gustafsson, Ahak was good in defense as well. Both goaltenders, I think, did pretty stellar as well throughout the weekend.
And Nick, he slid by without mentioning Joe Fleming one time. He didn't say Joe Fleming one time.
How about that, huh?
Well,
Tough to do.
Yeah, tough to do. He had I think he had eight penalty minutes in the last game or 10 or so. He's not afraid to get in the action. He's not afraid to drop the gloves. There was a fight that he did get involved with, and I think it was the first game of the day, or the first game of their weekend against Arizona. And of course, Mason Primeau also fought the next day against the Kings, which was kind of ironic because he fought an LA Kings player last year in Arizona, and I was thinking there must have been something to that. But I actually asked Mason Primeau a little bit today at development camp, and he said that was just coincidental. That's just kind of how he plays. He's a pretty intense player. He's a physical player. He's not afraid to get into a fight or two.
He's a big player.
Big player as well. Big size, yeah. So that was coincidental, but I thought that was kind of funny because it was the Kings last year he got into a fight with, and it was a Kings player this year he got into a fight with. But Fleming and Primeau as well. But I thought Vegas did okay, and I think they were happy with how some of these players performed.
All right, Nick, back to you with the LA Kings. Steven stole your thunder with the Brant Clark walk-off, which was a highlight. But anyway, he's good at doing that. He does that to me all the time. Anyway, a little bit about the LA Kings roster, which a lot of them will be in Ontario. I mentioned to you earlier, I thought number 55, Big Quentin Byfield, maybe could have performed better, and maybe he was just looking to move on. But your thoughts on LA?
It's interesting, right? Because LA is in a unique position when it comes to the NHL squad. When you go out and get big free agent signings like Kevin Fiala, right? That's less room for some of these younger players to make the roster, right? And so you kind of wonder with teams like LA and their younger talent, how they're looking at this sort of training camp experience with this rookie tournament. Do they feel like they have a shot, right? Quentin Byfield spent some time with the Kings last year. I know what we talked about Alex Turcotte too, and how some of these younger players could add that mix of good, solid veteran experience and then some of that younger, infection, you could say, to the roster. And to your point, Scott, it did kind of feel like Quentin Byfield, and this is maybe a hot take for those that are out there. It kind of felt like he wasn't well prepared. It didn't feel like his heart was in it. And that's disappointing if that is indeed the case. I'm not certainly accusing him of doing it that way, but from what I saw in terms of replays, it was a disappointing performance for Quentin Byfield. And I'm pretty sure for the Kings organization, they were hoping to count on him as being part of that youth movement into the LA Kings organization this season, especially trying to compete for a Pacific Division that beyond the Edmonton Oilers is still kind of wide open, maybe minus Calgary. So there's still a third spot up for grabs. And, that young talent can be a huge boost to get you that third spot and comfortably. So that is disappointing to see him have a kind of a down time. Now, I'm trying to see if he is with the big training camp. I think he is. And if he is, you kind of hope that, yeah, he is. So if take it as maybe, okay, this was not my best performance. He's going to have to really up his game with the big club, or else he may be the outside looking in the AHL, maybe not with the NHL if they've got better options or other players show better.
Yeah, well, I think a couple of things. It could have been like, and not fatigue is not the right word, but you know what I'm saying? It's like he felt maybe like he was ready to move on beyond that point.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's one thing. I think the other thing was last year he played hard. He broke his ankle or whatever it was, and it set him back for a long time. And he maybe was playing a bit apprehensive. I don't know. It's hard to say until you actually ask him. But he didn't look like he was going full bore 100%, like this meant something. Other guys certainly did play that way, I thought. And you know what? It is what it is at this point. But that was just a notice of mine. I thought David Rennick had a subpar tournament. I thought he hasn't really looked as sharp in the pro game as he did in the college game. So hopefully there's something that he can work through and get back to the David Rennick that we know. The other one was Taylor Ward, Nick, that I saw play at Omaha, and was a solid player. He's gotten bigger, faster, stronger. I think he was wearing a letter, an A for one of the games, if not a couple of them. I thought Taylor had a really good, outstanding performance for the King organization.
And Taylor Ward, to me, he was sort of an under the radar player with the Omaha Mavericks. There's really not much flash to his game. So he's not going to draw, say, the casual fan. He's not going to make any highlight reels. But the one thing Taylor Ward does do, he's blue collar. He work his tail off. He can skate. He can forecheck. He can play the physical part of the game if you ask him to. And then toward his senior season, he started to develop a little bit of a scoring touch, sort of kind of rounding out his game a little bit. And I think, obviously, his leadership, again, we talk about that NCAA connection with the NHL squads. They take notice, right? And I think I speak for all of us in this room for the NCHC conference. Every single one of the coaches, and they echoed that today, down in St. Paul, is they look not only for great players, they look for the natural leaders for their locker room too. And there's no question Taylor Ward fits that bill. And I think he made a very, very good impression. In fact, he is invited and will be part of the big club training camp. And so I hope for the best for him. I think he's got a chance. It's maybe an outside chance, but I do think that if he continues to grow and develop, he could be a really good, say, middle six, bottom six forward of the National Hockey League, a guy that will give you good, solid minutes and can be sort of a Swiss Army knife. He can play both the penalty kill. He can play offense if you ask him to. He's just a good overall utilitarian player.
Yep, I think the Southern California teams had a little bit different approach. Both Anaheim and Ontario, who will be in your coverage spectrum, but I think they had different approaches, and I think it had a lot to do with the fact that they have younger talent. Certainly in Anaheim. And LA is transitioning, right? They've got some guys that are a little bit older, but they're transitioning. And I think that combination may have put them in a different position at this tournament as far as what they were trying to accomplish.
I agree 100%. So,
Stephen, your thoughts on LA? Anything stand out to you on LA besides what you already told us? The great, the great escape, if you will, on the shootout.
I like that, the great escape. I really like that moment. That still makes these sort of things really great and entertaining. I mean, they're having fun, and you can see it when they're out there skating, or even after the games. They're maybe, or before their game, they're hanging out and watching the other teams play, or and just after that game, I went over and listened in on the Kings post game stuff that they had with those players, and just their excitement to be in this, and I just think that these players are just excited they get this opportunity. I mean, there's not a lot of opportunity that you get to play other teams in this kind of setting where you have a lot of eyeballs on you, like they do with these NHL player personnel people, scout people, whether it be for the teams involved, or there was a bunch from other teams that around the league that were there looking at what we're going on, taking copious notes and everything. So, when they go and play in the NHL, they go and play in the other levels. People watch them and keep eyes on them, obviously, and they come and check out some games. But it's something about having everybody there at one place and being able to play other players of similar age and groups and being able to compete at this level. So it kind of goes back to what Nick was saying earlier about, the games didn't matter, but they matter to them because that's what they're trying to show. And so somebody like Brant Clark, has a moment like that, and that gets the team going and rallies behind him. And then, Taylor Ward, as you said, was another player that was impressed. And I think this weekend was a good selling point for NCAA hockey because of all the great NCAA talent there is now, and they're getting opportunities at the pro level right out of college in some cases, in a lot of cases. And it wasn't like that always. So kudos to that too.
Good stuff. Okay, let's move on to the Arizona Coyotes, who again, Nick,
So
you got
Scott,
something?
before we do that, we need to take a quick break. We
gotta
gotta take a break, then we'll come back on Day Arizona.
Nice catch.
The NCHC, where the best in college hockey compete, and the numbers back it up. In the past 8 years, 6 teams in national title games that are run of 4 consecutive national championships, 2 Hobie Baker winners, and 46 All-Americans. More than 70 alumni in the NHL with multiple Stanley Cup champions. A leader and innovator in the sport, including a one-of-its-kind pod. One conference, creating champions and improving the game. This is the NCHC.
Really, JR? You think you can still do this?
I'm focused.
You're way too old to hit that target from there.
I've been listening to everything you said. It's been running through my head, locked and loaded.
All right, still got it. Still got it.
Who's old now?
More than 140 live games from the nation's best college hockey conference. Ready for you wherever you are, however you want to watch. Your favorite team is on NCHC.TV. On your phone, tablet, or stream to your TV. Subscribe now to watch the best in college hockey at NCHC.TV. If it's NCHC hockey, it's on NCHC.TV.
All right, welcome back in, hockey fans, to the Pro Hockey West Report. Scott Strandy with you in Inver Grove Heights, Minnesota tonight. Nick Maxon in the upper right-hand corner from Apple Valley, Minnesota, just a stone's throw away. And Stephen Marsh, who went black on us again. He does this to us once a night. Stephen, I don't know what the deal is.
At least.
So we've lost Stephen Marsh, at least on the video side of things, but
we'll get him back. That's all right.
Yeah.
So Scott, let's continue the conversation with Arizona. As you mentioned, we have also a couple of bites here from both Nathan Smith as well as Steve Potvin. But your impressions on Arizona, and they're in a unique position, aren't they, Scott?
They are. Remember how we talked just a minute ago about Anaheim and California and on LA having a different agenda, if you will. Well, same thing with the Coyotes. They have a lot of young talent that they just drafted, but the problem with it is they're young. Yeah?
Yes.
They're unable to be there. So they had to put together a pretty difficult roster, I think, for Coach Steve Potvin. And if there's a guy that you want to do this, Nick, it's Steve Potvin, because he's been around. He knows what he's doing, and he is able to bring the guys together and put things in perspective for them. So I think this was a, quote, learning and perspective. He reminded the guys, I know a number of times, that, hey, this is the NHL. There aren't many of these positions. And whether it's in Arizona or whether you're in Edmonton or whether you're with the Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche, it's still professional. Hey, look who's back. Anyway, Steven, you're always good for one a night. I love it. Anyway, now I lost my train of thought too. Anyway, I think that the fact that they're it doesn't matter where you play or what organization. It's still professional hockey. You're still getting a paycheck. It's still living out a dream. So not to bash the Coyotes, because that's not what this is about, but it's difficult times right now. Let's just be honest. The parent club's got difficult times, and as we talked about in previous shows, it bleeds down to the AHL level as well and the ECHL level, because they all feel it, right? I mean, they move back and forth, and a lot of these guys that were there are going to be participating this week in the training camp for the Coyotes, and there's open spots, but then there isn't open spots, and so it's a difficult spot. But I thought Steve Potvin did a fantastic job and handled himself very well throughout the week. I thought Nathan Smith, again, wearing a letter, did wonderful things for the Coyotes. I thought another college player, and Colin Tyson from Notre Dame fame and the last year at Arizona State. I know Arizona State really claims him hard, but he did play at Notre Dame a few years before that. But anyway, Colin looked really well out there as well, and I thought their goaltenders were pretty good. Barabo was pretty good when he got his opportunity, and they played physical, they played tight, they played smart, they played good hockey. They just came up on the short end 2 times and only got 1 win out there, but they competed.
And that's all you can ask for, right, Scott, is you compete, you bring your best, you learn and you grow. And more so, I think often we overlook play the game the right way, right? And I think this goes back to your San Jose, your comments, right? It's, you want to make an impression, but do it the right way. Do it with your skill. Do it what got you here. Don't try to reinvent the wheel just for the sake of making an impression. And for Arizona too, right? I think it's important that these young kids, they're going to rely on a lot of these young kids, right, Scott? Whether some of it we see in this tournament or others that may be currently on the roster. I mean, it's a very unique position for this club, even as a player. And so they're going to be relying heavily on their younger talent, while some things on off the ice sheet, I should say, are getting sorted out still.
Connor Geekie, Dylan Gunther, 2 more that stood out. I thought they played really well and made their mark, if you will, with the Coyotes organization. Steven, anything you saw with the Coyotes that we haven't mentioned?
Not that I know of. I mean, I didn't hear everything because I had some connection issues.
You had a blackout.
So I had to fix. Had a blackout. Yeah, that happens on occasion, I guess. No, I think you hit it well. I think that you're right. The Coyotes are young.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. they're a younger team, I think, obviously at the top and also at this level too. And a lot of these guys were either drafted this year or they were just signed on this year. So a lot of these guys haven't been in the organization for that long. So it's some fresh eyes for sure for the Coyotes organization, which is a lot of these prospects are all new to the organization. So that can be exciting too in that regard. And I think out of all the teams that are in this, that were in this rookie face-off, I think the Coyotes leave the most opportunity for NHL spots. Obviously, their situation is not ideal with what's happening with the NHL club, but if you're looking for an NHL job, there's some openings, I think, with the Coyotes. And so some of these guys you mentioned, like Connor Geekie and Dyson and McCartney especially, I think I'll have an opportunity to find an opportunity to get on with the big club.
Yeah, good stuff. I'm glad you brought up Ben McCartney too. And don't you and Nick both drop the gloves now when you talk San Jose. Don't drop the gloves on me and take me on 2-on-1, because it's a possibility. Maybe you two are going to gang up on me after my evil thoughts of the San Jose Sharks. But what did you find out, Stephen? What do you think of the Sharks organization?
Well, other than that, I think they were the home team, and I think they wanted to show that they were the home team. They had the crowd behind them. They were the last game each day, obviously, and I think they wanted to come out with a good performance, and I think they did that. Obviously, they won 2 games and lost 1 game. They had an overtime win on Friday, and won convincingly on Saturday, and then on Monday they lost. But I think by then everybody was just kind of ready to be done. But I think Thomas Bordelot was really impressive. Tristan Robbins, who had a couple of goals in the game against Colorado, looked good. Who else? I mean, Artemi Guriev on defense, and that line with Montana Onabochi both had goals in that game against Colorado. So those are some players that really are impressive. The goaltending was pretty good for the most part. So San Jose again is another organization that's still pretty. It's pretty young, and it's kind of in a transformative stage of what they wanted to do. And I guess there's some opportunity with the big club too. And and I think that they want to be in the mix. They want to be in the mix for a playoff spot. They want to be in the mix at the AHL level, because the AHL team last year finished towards the bottom. They have a new coach in town, who's of course very familiar with the organization
at both levels.
At both levels, yeah. He's
and a new GM.
And a new GM, and so I think all that it can be exciting. I think it's always kind of bittersweet when the one coach or GM goes and then another is brought in, but I think there's also a sense of excitement and a fresh start. I think kind of got that vibe with Vegas a little bit with some of the younger players that I talked with. They have a new opportunity with the new coaching staff at the top. Like a Paul Cotter, who I had to converse with a little bit, and maybe he feels with a new coach, maybe he'll get a different look, and that he can get an opportunity with the big club that maybe the previous staff preferred other guys or liked their way that they played better. So I think all that can be big too. So
Scott, I've got a couple. I got some thoughts. I'm going to do my best Stephen A. Smith impression now.
Oh, boy.
Oh yes, holy cow!
We don't have enough time for that, I think.
I can condense it. In the NHL and in the American Hockey League, there are contenders and there are pretenders. The San Jose Sharks should win the Oscar for Best Actor. Here's why I say that. I'm roasting the Sharks a little bit here. The San Jose Sharks, they had probably the most sustained success of being a consistent playoff team for the better part of the mid-2000s. I think everybody would agree with that. They traded away a lot of their futures to get what they thought were missing pieces to make a Stanley Cup run. They finally made a deep run in 2017 before the Pittsburgh Penguins entered the chat. But they really, truly haven't been able to restock their cupboards, right, Scott? And I think one job that Mike Greer has, and one thing that's been talked about with the organization, is when are they going to embrace who this team actually is? To me, the San Jose Sharks are a team that's missing so many pieces. They have so much money tied up in aging players. And I'm not certainly, let's talk about Erik Karlsson, right? A guy that I don't think has lived up to that contract. And granted, it's been a lot of, he's not been the same player since his injuries, and I don't think he ever will be. But at some point, you have to turn the leaf. You have to accept who you are, look in the mirror and say, hey, look at our cupboard stock. They don't have a lot of high-end talent coming in. They don't have a lot of talent in their big club currently, though I think that to be competitive, especially with the Pacific Division, that to me is topped with Edmonton, Los Angeles, and Calgary. I don't think they're better than those teams at all. So when you look at that, I really, truly think that you're going to see a San Jose Sharks organization this year that finally faces the reality, which is we're not good enough and we need to start looking at the future. And dare I say, yeah, they signed some guys to contracts, but I think you might start seeing some guys on the move. And I really, truly think San Jose needs to do that, because honestly, they're not going to compete in the Pacific Division. To me, they're not a playoff squad, and they don't have the future assets to keep building on it. And with their salary cap situation, they need cheaper, younger assets to sort of rebuild it. So that's my take on it. I'm curious, Scott or Steven, if I'm crazy or if I have any sort of validity to my statements.
Well, look what they did. They traded away Aiden Hill not too long ago to Vegas, and for some future, I think for some draft picks or future considerations. So that was somebody that they obviously these younger guys.
It's not high-end draft picks, though. That's the thing.
Right,
they don't have any high-end guys.
Right. But that kind of goes what you were saying about them kind of selling off a little bit, maybe. Here's the question I want to pose: is that you're talking about aging players? Will Joe Thornton be a member of the San Jose Sharks?
No.
When it comes to the season, because Scott,
he was wearing a teal helmet.
He was. What
if he was wearing a yellow helmet, guys? Just a thought.
We have to. Yeah. Well,
if he was wearing a sparkling gold one, he'd be in Vegas. Right. So we know that's not happening.
No.
Right. We already got Phil Kessel here, so not that he's old or anything. He's still got some years. But
He's not.
Yeah, no, but he's not 40-something years old like Joe Thornton is.
43,
Almost
by
like
the
the
way.
top 43. Yes, kind of getting into Tom Brady category. But,
Tom Brady's won
yeah.
championships, so that's
Good.
the only difference.
Yeah, that's true.
Good.
Yeah,
Okay,
just a few. Anyways,
So
I
threw some shade on San Jose. I'm going to bring it back just a little bit and just challenge you two for a minute. I saw some talent. I saw William Eklund make an unbelievable spinorama goal to win a shootout or win an overtime.
Yeah, an
32
overtime, yeah.
seconds in. So I think William Eklund is one of the guys that's going to stand out. They do have Thomas Bordeleau, who I believe it can be a standout for them. We talked about them trading away Aiden Hill. Well, they traded away Aiden Hill because they have two pretty darn good goaltenders that we saw. They got Strauss-Mann, the former Michigan product, that was a steal, if you ask me, to come into that lineup. And they drafted a goaltender this year in the 4th round. We talked about it, Nick. I still can't say the kid's name. Bopit or Bopit.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Yeah, Bo something. Baupit. He's a big kid. He's 18 years old. He was the best goaltender that I saw this entire weekend from any of the teams. He was just very, very solid. Now, the question is, do you take 18 years old and throw him out there? Or do you let him get better somewhere else? Because he's your best goaltender right now. And I don't know what you do.
You know, here's the thing, right? So let's talk about some guys, right? So long-term, Tomas Hertl and Logan Couture, they have them locked up long-term. But beyond that, Timo Meier, he's in the last year of his deal.
Yeah.
He's 25. Kevin LeBanc is 26, right? They traded for Luke Cunnin. He's 24. Oscar Lindblom, who signed this free, he's 26, right? Nick Bonino's 34. Nico Sturm's 27. Just name a few. On the back end, you have Eric Carlson at 32. Mark Edward Vlasic at 35. Radim Šimić at 30. You don't really, and that's the thing with me is, let's just say you even put in the 18-year-olds. Let's say you bring up William Eklund, and I'm no question Thomas Bordeleau will be there because he was there last year. But at some point, and a lot of those guys are entering either the last year of their contract or they have another year thereafter, is you have the contract set up where there's going to be some major changes happening. So my question to you is it enough? And my thought is it's not enough. It's going to be enough to draw interest from the fan base, but to me, it's not enough to overcome the depth of talent from Edmonton, LA, and Calgary. And that to me is, if you're going to protect or build around players, a new core, William Eklund, as well as Thomas Bordeleau, are a good place to start. Strauss-Mann again, but you're not bringing up an 18-year-old goaltender with that kind of a lineup. I think you protect him. I think you send him back to juniors if he's eligible, or at least put him in the American Hockey League. But to me, would be sort of inconsiderate to bring an 18-year-old goaltender to start for your NHL club, despite the fact he might be their best goaltender. But that was at the rookie faceoff. I would like to see how he does if he's invited to pro camp, to see how he does against some of the better talent that's out there. That's just my thoughts. I think you protect your young asset. I don't think you throw him into the wolves.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that, but I will say if you do bring him back, he's going to be a standout. It wasn't just who he was playing against. It was what I look at in goaltenders as far as style, positioning, the way that he carried himself. It wouldn't have mattered if he was against Gretzky. He was still a pretty solid goaltender. So I don't think that's the issue, but I agree with you, Nick. I think he's going to end up going back to the junior club. He's too young. At 18, he can't play in the AHL anyway. So he's going to either have to go back or he's going to have to sit on this roster and do something. And I don't know. I don't know what David Quinn's going to do. He's the man in charge now, so we'll find out.
That we will. And again, you talk about a team that's, I think you mentioned it, Stephen, perfectly, team in flux. San Jose, to me, might be a bigger flux team than, say, Arizona. At least Arizona knows where they're at, in theory, in terms of where their roster is and how it needs to be constructed. I still feel like San Jose is still trying to feel it out a little bit. I have a predict, again, I predict that they will be out of a playoff spot quickly. The question is, what would they do in response to that? Do they finally, under new leadership, do they finally take that opportunity to maybe rebuild and restock the cupboard a little bit? Or do they, dare I say, try to be buyers of the deadline and, try to make a push? I guess it depends on maybe where the Central is, but the Central is pretty deep. So to me, it's a long shot for the Sharks to be a playoff contender. And even then, say you do end up being a playoff contender, for how long? I still feel like you have to inject more youth into that organization. You've got a couple of pieces you can, but you still need more.
Not going to argue that one a bit. We're running out of time, so I will tell you that it was a great time at the rookie faceoff. All the camps starting up right now. Steven's had a chance to get out and see the Golden Knights, and Nick and I will work our way into it. As everybody knows, we've got college coverage as well before things get going, and our AHL teams get started in mid to late October. So we'll get started with those as well. But we thank everybody for tuning in tonight to the Pro Hockey West Report. And we'll look forward to seeing you all again next Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time. Have a good night, everybody.